Welcome to Techforce Africa, where we look at some of the important issues that are affecting technology businesses in and around Africa. Now, for today, we delve into a very important and a highly, engaging topic, and that is women in tech or women in technology. And I'm delighted to say that for today, we are joined by Otema Urenchi, who is Vice President of Mediterranean and African growth markets over at Salesforce. Otema is going to be sharing her thoughts on this matter of women in technology and both within Africa and the wider world. Otema, greetings to you today.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Now, thank you so much for taking your time. But before we get into the discussion, our tradition here on Tech Force Africa is to start off with a little bit of an icebreaker just to get, the juices flowing. So for today, I think we can, just start there, looking at, some either or. To get the ball rolling, do you prefer to start early or to finish late?
I like to start early.
And would you travel back in time or travel to the future?
I think I travel to the future.
That's a good one. Senegalese jollof rice or Ghanaian jollof rice?
Oh, it's got to be Ghana.
Definitely a big bone of contention. It's a good one. We didn't throw in the Nigerian variant of this one.
Absolutely.
And then, do you prefer productivity or efficiency?
Efficiency.
Efficiency. And then, ebooks or physical books?
I love to turn the pages. Yeah, so a real book.
All right, a real book, keeping it old school.
Hmm.
So now we can get, into today's important discussion, like we said, looking and exploring this topic of women in tech. But one of the big ones, is to get to know a little bit about yourself. You've held a number of senior positions, a number of roles over at Salesforce and other companies. And the question is, what was your dream job, growing up?
Actually, I wanted to be at the UN. So my first job, my first internship was at the UN. But what was always my passion was how do I change things? How do we make things better? And so that was my dream. And then I was, through the graduate program, I joined another tech company and it was all around how do we take the technology to the world? So I kind of meshed the two, if you will, changing the world, but actually doing it with what? With technology.
Mm. And when it comes to, changing the world, obviously, the topic of women in tech is a big one.
Mhm.
At the moment, how do we engender, some type of transformation, then actually make sure that it's complete? And there's actually has been, some would argue to say that there's been a lot of progress that's been made. In this regard, a lot of demonstrable success, that is being made, a lot of strides. But at the end of the day, there is still, a lot of underrepresentation in many technology roles. What do you think of that state of affairs?
Yes, I agree. There has been quite a bit of progress. I think many more women are getting into STEM, so that means you have a pipeline of engineers, etc. But there's also a lot of opportunity in other areas within technology. And I think that that's what I realized. I thought, well, I studied business and economics. Is there a place for me in tech? But there certainly was, because you can be in sales, you can be in legal, you can be in marketing, you can be in coding, you could do so many things within the tech space. And I think that that then opens it up for a lot of women. So we have a pipe, we've got the middle, and as we get to the top, maybe that's where we can start to see a lot more women moving into leadership. And I'm really committed to that at Salesforce, is to see more women moving up into leadership roles.
At this point, it probably seems a bit of an obvious question because of the fact that we're even having this discussion.
Mhm.
But maybe you could outline for us, just break it down and make it, very clear to anyone who's watching or listening, just around why representation is so important and what it means for, the broader industry as a whole.
Yeah, I think representation is so important. I can share my own story where,
Yeah.
in many times, I would be the only woman and perhaps maybe the only Black woman in a room. And you need to have that additional sense of representation, meaning do you see others that look like you, who understand you, etc. And then also, I think very importantly, bringing that diverse perspective. It's not just about having a woman in the room for the sake of it, but women and people of other cultures and nationalities bring a diverse perspective and insights that make us all succeed. So I think that for me is what's critical, is ensuring that more people have a seat at the table, because I believe it is wide and deep enough for us all.
I guess tied to all of this is the fact that this is a pervasive issue, across the board. And
Mhm.
you hear, similar stories being said, in other industries. And I
Mm.
think earlier on at the beginning of the conversation, you started off by saying that, one of your dreams was, to work for the UN, for example. Technology in particular, what is it about this particular space that has captured your attention?
Well, I think one, I love technology, its utilization, etc. And for the Africa continent, I think it's been transformative. Let me give you an example. When I'm in Ghana, where my family is from, I can use mobile money to do anything. I can buy stuff. I can, we go to a restaurant. My mother has a gardener in her house. He doesn't have a bank account, but he has a mobile money account and he can utilize, I can send him his monthly earnings. So I feel like the transformation, one, technology brings in so many people who may have traditionally been left behind. And I talked about how I like efficiency and ease. So within how many clicks I'm able to pay these set of people in my mom's house or go to a restaurant and pay for food. So for me, it's that ease, it's the inclusiveness, and it's the opportunity to solve some challenging problems that we have currently in our world. We can use technology for that. I think another great example is we have in our family, we do some volunteering and stuff, and in some of the more remote areas in Ghana, they're trying to use drones to do what? To deliver medicine. So that's where technology is so impactful. It's changing and addressing some of our complex issues today and also building for tomorrow.
Now, it certainly is, doing a lot to help us out there. I like the mobile money example that you gave because, when you travel, to certain parts, of the continent, I'm yet to visit the western part, but having visited the eastern part, you see
Mhm.
how pervasive your mobile monies are and just how simple it is to, sort of usurp cash.
Mhm.
That is inherently, a lot of people would say that cash isn't safe.
Mhm.
And that cash has a lot of limits, to it. And, seeing how things like your mobile phone can help to solve for the everyday challenges that people have when it comes to simple transactions and stuff like that. It's really great to see, how, technology can help to actually have an impact and drive change in people's lives. Coming back to this issue of the representation that we're talking about.
Mhm.
At the beginning, we started off talking about the fact that some would argue that there has been a lot of progress being made in terms of getting more women involved into developer roles, coding, the VC side of things, the entire value chain.
Mhm.
But in your experience, since you started in the industry, what would you say your experience has been in terms of seeing that progress on the ground? Is it really as much progress as we say, or do you see areas of lack?
I think there's a lot of progress. I'm not going to date myself and tell you when I started in tech, but certainly when I started, I can tell you in my graduate joining group at a very large tech company, there were 3 females that we joined, okay? And we had to learn so much. And sometimes it felt a bit intimidating, right? But if I look at the journey now from going from, I've been in IT, I've been in telco, now back into IT, I can tell you there is a lot more pipeline. Many more women and girls are studying in STEM at the beginning. And then also you have people who, as I mentioned, are across different disciplines, but within the tech industry, right? So it's the coding, as you mentioned, it's the VCs, it's the legal, it's the marketing, it's the sales. That's all part of the tech sort of environment. And I think that number is growing. I think there's more to be done. And where I think that there's more to be done is we've done an incredible job of the pipe, building those capacities and skills and getting young women hired and then into the middle. But then there's that missing part up into leadership, right? And that's where I think we need to invest more to ensure that women's careers are sustained and that they can move up into the leadership ranks. Because now that I've moved up into leadership, I'm back into this very few space, very few women, very few women.
It is, really great to see the fact that, there is progress, but like you said, there are always areas of improvement. And, one of the things that's always great is when you see, those women that are in leadership positions, quite notably, I think the one that can't be denied is a figure like your Sheryl Sandbergs
Mhm.
of this world, making their mark. I can even think about, over at Bloomberg. There's a lady called Emily Chang who's done a lot to actually point out some of the inequities, that are in the industry across, that pipeline that you were talking about. But drilling down specifically on Salesforce, how is the company, actually helping from that point of view and, that perspective? Can you tell us just around, what the culture's like there and some of the initiatives being made?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that's so interesting is that Salesforce, we actually did an audit in 2015, company-wide, and it revealed that there was a pay disparity, right? And that pay disparity was between the sexes, male and female, and we decided to close that pay gap. And we've spent over 10 plus million ensuring equal pay for equal work for women and other minorities. And I think that's a really great demonstration of our commitment at Salesforce.
Mm. And obviously, because this is Techforce Africa, we have to
Right,
drill down even further,
right.
to get a sense of what that, particular discussion and conversation looks like, when we look at, Salesforce's, involvement in the African market.
Yeah, so what I lead, we call it the Africa Growth Markets, and that's Africa outside of South Africa and Egypt, so that wide swath of North, East, West, and Central. And so I think one of the things they've done is they've hired a woman, right, to lead that area, and I think that that's quite good. I'm also very conscious to ensure that I have highly skilled women on the team. And I'm happy to say I've just recently hired a woman from Senegal. So we're going to have that Jollof battle, right? But and we're super focused on that. We have communities in North Africa, in Morocco, where there's trailblazers and there's lots of women. There's an amazing trailblazer woman who is from Liberia, who is driving our training. It's called Talent Task Force for Africa, Nell, and she's doing a tremendous job building local capacity across West Africa. So those are just a few examples of what we are doing at Salesforce and the women who are leading that. And I think one great shout out is to Ursula Fears, who runs our skills development for Africa. And she's a woman, and being very conscious too that within these programs that we're doing, that we focus on women as well.
Really great to hear of some of the people that you are putting into place, Otema, and someone like and also some of the shout outs that you gave.
Mm.
Someone like Ursula Fierce, that's someone that I have engaged with and interacted with. Definitely a trailblazer. But when it comes to actually making sure that we have that pipeline in place and making sure that people are being groomed, in the lower, the mid, and upper ranks of a company like Salesforce or the rest of the sector. Could you just talk to us a little bit around what you guys are doing, but also at the same time, if you have any case studies, of any specific people that you want to highlight, either journey or anything to just make it more concrete in people's minds.
Sure. So company-wide, there is Future Force, which is sort of the graduate program that brings in young graduates and people to skill up. In the wider community, of course, we have our Trailblazer community. And that's where I was mentioning also someone like Nell, who has, with a group of people, developed the Africa Task Force. I mean, and that, the Talent Task Force, that is amazing, where you find youth in countries like Liberia, in Nigeria and Ghana. So it's now currently just focused on West Africa, where they are building their skills, getting certified, and ready to join the Salesforce ecosystem. And that's a really well supported program. So I think on the continent, you have these initiatives, and we're going to be doing more, obviously, with Ursula. And then myself, I try to be really focused on helping young people, volunteering and mentoring. So focusing them on careers in tech. So now that I'm at Salesforce, hopefully I'll be bringing in a lot more African youth. But what I focus on is skills, right? Both their technical skills and capabilities, but also what we used to call kind of the soft skills. But I think those are your power skills, right? So, how can you be an effective communicator? How can you deliver with impact and have strong presence? How do you understand the sort of the how you work, because maybe some of the kids coming from diverse backgrounds aren't as familiar with some of the ways of work, right? And so I also want to share those components. So it's about building their skills, it's about building the power skills, and it's also about the ways of working more effectively so that you can reach those milestones that you want for yourself. So that's what I'm about, is the programs, asking, and I'm going to be shouting out, so asking people who are listening, are you mentoring? Are you pulling someone back from behind to move forward?
And in terms of pulling people from behind and moving forward, any success stories that you have for us?
Yes, so I have a number of young people. I started with them more than back in 2010 in several countries in Africa. They were mostly, we started with them as I was at IBM at the time. And now many of them are at different companies. Some have moved on to Oracle, some have moved on to SAP, and I'm hoping to get some of them at Salesforce, but they've done tremendously well. And we've kept sort of this network, and they become sort of, they're a bit of my young tribe because they tell me what's happening, what's hip, what's going on, and what what needs to happen from the generation who's ahead of them, how we can support them and their growth. So that's a bit of, I'm really super proud of those young people that are dispersed across Africa at the moment.
I think the point that you've just raised now with your team, that the network that you've been building of these young people, sounds like a decade long,
Yeah,
type of
yes,
relationship
it is.
that we're talking about. Is the fact that by you helping to pull them, like what you were talking about just now, they also help you in terms of keeping up with
You.
what's actually going on, what's going on in their generation, pain points,
Mhm.
and that type of thing. So it's definitely a win win-win from that point of view. And tied to that is the fact that you mentioned that, these young ladies that you were speaking about are from several countries.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, despite, some thinking Africa is not homogenous, it's not one country. Um,
No, it's
it's made up of, many territories,
mhm,
50 plus countries, many
mhm.
provinces, religions, peoples, languages. How do you, what type of measures, do you actually have in place? To actually gauge the fact that the nuances in all of the different markets that you're dealing with when it comes to representation of women, is actually taken care of, especially when it comes to that support and development of, the women in those roles.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. Like, I was asked to do some speaking in Nigeria, in northern Nigeria, which is predominantly an Islamic area. And I remember going in and thinking, okay, we had certain ideas about how we wanted to run the programs and stuff, but I always meet people where they are. And so the person coordinating it said it's going to be a woman only group. And that's because it's a very conservative environment. And so we had to scramble and find females who were going to provide the coaching and mentoring. Right. So that was the first big ask. And the thing is, we could have gone in and said, you know what, these are the people we had. We had, a couple of guys, but I realized that if we really wanted to make the impact, we had to meet that particular tech hub where they were. And they were in a very, as I said, Islamic conservative environment. And so if we wanted the women to benefit from the coaching and stuff, we had to meet them. And it ended up being a very successful program. A number of the women graduated and did well, and there were no boys, but they did well. So I think that was a good lesson for me in terms of the nuances. So what was the goal? The goal was to have the impact and to have women be educated. And if we had to adapt, and I think that's about the nuance of understanding the market, understanding the culture. And then as you do that, you get more people on board. Because had we shown up perhaps maybe with a group of guys, we wouldn't have gotten the attendance that we needed.
Mm,
Maybe the fathers wouldn't have allowed them to attend. But because we understood that, and we only brought in female coaches and etc., we had strong attendance. So those are the kinds of nuances that are important that I do take into account when
yeah.
I'm working in the region.
I think the issue of nuance sort of points to one of the biggest complexities when it comes to dealing with the issue of representation, because there are a lot of intangible factors. There's a lot of, for lack of a better word, complexity that is involved in all this. And a lot of the time, it always bodes well, to be able to measure
Mhm.
the success of certain initiatives and steps that are being made and addressed. So maybe you could talk to us just around, how you guys are addressing the issue of measurement. How do you quantify? Salesforce, is one of those companies that's famous, for data and all of that. How do you guys measure when it comes to these efforts around representation?
So, focusing on, let's say, the talent side, right? I think the key is looking at how many people that we're getting through some of these initiatives. So, looking at how many people are in the initiatives, how many people are then getting successfully certified. And that number, we want to measure that year on year growth, right? So, as I mentioned, Nell has a program that's covering West Africa. She and I have discussed, so she's got specific targets, right? So the next time you come back to me and talk at Techforce, I'll share with you, because these are newer programs, I can be able to share with you how many of the students have gone through their certification, because we're measuring that, right? So
Yeah.
it's a multi-month program, which kicked off. And now that we are getting people to that point, so it's train them, then get them ready for their certification and help them prepare, and then get them certified, and then hopefully into some kinds of internships, etc. So that's what we're looking to do. And as I might not have mentioned this, but I'm only in role since February of this year. So I feel like we're doing great things in a really short amount of time.
And we'll certainly be there to see how things grow and develop as your tenure does continue. A lot of things achieved in a very short space of time. Who knows where we'll be by the time you reach year 2, year 3. But before we actually went live, I came across the Salesforce Women's Network, and
Mhm.
for the benefit of our audience, that's a significant Europe, Middle East, and Africa equality group actually tasked with overseeing gender equality programs. Could you offer us some examples just around, how that works, and specifically its relationship for Africa's women in tech?
Sure. So thank you. So funny enough, I'm attending my first event for that network tomorrow, and I'm going to get tucked in there. And I think one of the key things I'd like to see is us to start to formulate that for our Africa areas. I know there's a great one happening in South Africa. There's a network there. And so what we would like to do is to make sure that we see that in other parts of Africa as well, so that there would be a network. And I think for that network, my focus would be around mentoring, because that is, as you see in the ones that exist currently, there is a lot of mentoring and coaching, a formal program where young women can connect with people that are more mature in their careers and provide them coaching and guidance. So that's what I'd like to see. And I think this is great when you, as I said, I'm sure you're going to interview me again. And when you do, we'll be able to kick off and share with you the results of the work that we've done.
I like the fact that you're already, outlining some of the things that you'd like to achieve, because I think a big question at this point is what goals do you have,
Mhm.
when it comes to actually achieving more equal representation across the African markets, that you're looking after. And because we've detailed, throughout this discussion, where we've been and sort of where we are. So in terms of, peering into the future, as you are approaching, your mark here, what type of things would you like to see?
Well, one, I would like to see more female representation on the Africa teams. And as I said, I've already kicked that off by hiring someone from Senegal and hope to see that, so that we have parity across the countries that we serve. I'd also like to see a greater female participation in our early talent programs, because I believe that that begins to give us the pipeline. So in the Africa Task Force around talent, like to see, my goodness, should I put a stake in the ground and say, can we have 50% female in these cohorts? That would be an amazing
Yes.
achievement. So love to see that. And then also within our partner ecosystem, I'd like to see more women entrepreneurs becoming Salesforce partners and hiring and growing their businesses. So one, internally, two, in terms of talent, building our capability and capacity, but also in terms of entrepreneurship, having more women becoming Salesforce consulting partners, ISVs, developing apps. I would like to see that in the Africa region and beyond.
It's really great, that you're taking such a holistic approach because, it's one thing to do things internally, but companies like Salesforce are, driven, and quite a bit by those partner networks,
Mhm,
those evangelists, that are on the ground dealing with customers and the like. And if
mhm.
you can have, that representation in those networks, it really does, quite a lot to achieve, a number of the goals and, the stake in the ground that that you've put down there for yourself. 50%. It's definitely something that can happen. But for the people that are, sitting, watching, listening, to this discussion, whether it's, the women that are coming up in the ranks themselves, or perhaps the advocates, that are looking to support, greater representation. What type of action do you suggest that they actually take when it comes to some of the Salesforce initiatives?
So I think the first thing is they should get on Trailhead, because Trailhead is it's free. And so that's a real democratizing thing, right? So to acquire knowledge freely, I think that's a first step. And it gets you exposed to our platform, and it gives you skills. And it allows you, as you build up, let's say your badges, et cetera, to become a trailblazer. I would also recommend joining one of the communities. There are a lot of communities that are forming, and some are been in existence for a while. And then from there, you can sort of network and grow your business, as well as seek for job opportunities. So I think those are two things that those who are listening can do immediately. So once they finish listening, go on to Trailhead and log on and create your profile. And then also, if there's a community in your area, join.
So that's the advice there. Go to Trailheads, make sure that you register a profile, join, and get the journey started from that point of view. Really great discussion, Otema. Just highlighting what some of the efforts are over at Salesforce. We're talking about women in technology. Detailing the progress that has been made so far. But Otema just making the point to say that there is still more that can be done, particularly when it comes to skilling, as well as actually increasing those pipelines when it comes to getting more women involved in some of the leadership roles across the value chain. Not only within the tech companies, there's legal, there's marketing, there's venture capital, there's a lot that can be done both internally as well as within the partner network. And then lastly, just giving us some insight into some of the things that people can do. And she shared as well some of her goals just around that representation in the region. And of particular interest was the fact of nuance, to say that when you're dealing with a number of different markets across a territory, you do need to go in there on an individualized basis. And you can't take what's worked in one area and hope that it'll work wherever you go. You sort of have to take it, adapt it, and make sure that there is the right, fit whenever you go in there. So thank you so much, Otema, for just giving us and sharing those insights, with us on that point of view.
Thank you so much.
No, no, thank you. But before we do let you go, we wanted to, maybe do something that gives us yet, another little bit of insight. You've shared quite a bit of your journey, with us already, but we wanted to get a sense from you around, the best and the worst, piece of career advice you've ever received.
That's a good question. So I
Yeah.
think let me start with the worst. I think I was once told, be more assertive like a man. As the worst advice. And I think that the best advice, conversely, was around the fact that there are no limits, and the limits that you see for yourself, they're just in your mind.
Mm.
So break through those limits and keep climbing. So that's what I would say to everyone. There are no limits, so keep climbing, keep pushing for that dream that you have.
Break through the limits and keep climbing. Those are the words of Otema Urenchi, who is the Vice President of Mediterranean and African growth markets over at Salesforce. And that brings us to the end of this particular session and episode. This has been Techforce Africa, where we look at some of the important issues affecting technology businesses in Africa.